Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. When we talk about the founding of this country and kind of those early documents, people always remember the Declaration of Independence. They remember, stuff that was written by the Continental Congress. They might even remember something that was said or written by the men of Boston and Williamsburg and Philadelphia. But even though we know that the frontier was part of the Revolution, people kind of forget that, these were also educated men who put things in writing and were eloquent in their own way. We're not just talking about, some kind of hicks in the backcountry that all they're really good for is fighting Indians and fighting the British on the frontier if it comes to that. There's a lot more to them than that. So, while we can probably find examples to support any claim when we're talking about the political views of frontiersmen, there's some really interesting surviving documents that demonstrate a consensus among the freeholders of the area. Now, freeholders were men of at least 21 years of age who also met certain property requirements. The frontier of Virginia was comprised of Botetourt, Fincastle, and Augusta counties. When the First Continental Congress was taking place, as I've mentioned in other videos, this is when the men of the Virginia frontier were off in what's now West Virginia fighting Lord Dunmore's War, the Battle of Point Pleasant. They had their own stuff that they were trying to take care of. And actually, before they even returned home, they wrote what's called the Fort Gower Resolves, or at least some of them did, asserting that they were loyal subjects of the king, but that they would put America, and specifically Virginia, first, no matter what. Soon after these men returned home, that's when they would get word of the results of that First Continental Congress, and they responded. The first such response was from Fincastle County. This is what's now Southwest Virginia, extending back into, West Virginia, all the far west of the backcountry at that time. These were a lot of the people who were really pushing the boundaries of that Proclamation of 1763. Their appointed committee that they came up with was comprised of 15 men. And what these men composed is dated January 20th of 1775. So this would have been soon after they returned, and before a lot of other colonies or even other areas of Virginia even responded. This would be published in the Virginia Gazette on February 10th. And the 15 men that I referenced, this includes men like Reverend Charles Cummings, who's referred to as a fighting parson on the frontier. He was a Presbyterian pastor that was called to the area. He was originally from County Donegal in Ulster, Ireland, and he served the people of Southwest Virginia in multiple capacities, both as a spiritual leader and as a fighter. There's also Arthur and William Campbell, both Scots-Irish but born here in Virginia. Arthur spent 3 years as a prisoner, an Indian captive, during the French and Indian War. William was at the Battle of Point Pleasant in Lord Dunmore's War, and then he would also become the hero of King's Mountain in the American Revolution. Speaking of men who fought in that Western expedition that resulted in the Battle of Point Pleasant, that also includes signers Walter Crockett, William Christian, William Edmondson, William Ingalls, William Russell, and Evan Shelby. The rest of the signers were Thomas Madison, James McGavick, John Montgomery, Daniel Smith, Stephen Trigg, and William Preston. And the thing about these other men that I said weren't present for that battle, a lot of them were actually still serving in, what was required for Lord Dunmore's War. They just weren't part of that Western expedition. They were protecting the frontier in other ways. So all of these men had been preoccupied with those events, which makes the fact that they respond so quickly to the Congress and, respond so eloquently that much more impressive. So when I say the Fincastle Resolves, or the Fincastle Resolutions, I've heard it phrased both ways. When I say that these were written right after they were actively fighting, they absolutely were. They even allude to this at the beginning of the document. And, then they congratulate the First Continental Congress. They say they heartily concur with their resolutions. And they, again, refer to themselves as loyal subjects of the crown, just like in the Fort Gower Resolves. But then they say this: But if no specific measures shall be proposed or adopted by Great Britain, and our enemies will attempt to dragoon us out of these inestimable privileges which we are entitled to as subjects, and to reduce us to a state of slavery, we declare that we are deliberately and resolutely determined never to surrender them to any power upon earth, but at the expense of our lives. These are our real, though unpolished sentiments of liberty and loyalty, and in them we are resolved to live and die." End quote. Now, two of the signers, William Christian and Thomas Madison, they were at this very same time brothers-in-law of Patrick Henry. 2 months later, on March 23rd of 1775, Patrick Henry would give his famous Liberty or Death speech, where he says, quote, "Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." End quote. I think there's some real similarities between what was stated in the Fincastle resolves and what Henry said in his speech. I have to wonder if maybe the brothers-in-law were talking. Not that this was an uncommon sentiment at the time, but there's some key words that get repeated there. And it certainly doesn't undermine the respect I have for Patrick Henry's speech either way. But the backcountry doesn't stop there. Next were the Augusta resolutions. In this, they stated, among other things, that, quote, "Many of us and our forefathers left their native land, explored this once savage wilderness, to enjoy the free exercise of the rights of conscience and of human nature. These rights we are fully resolved, with our lives and fortunes, inviolably to preserve. Nor will we surrender such inestimable blessings, the purchase of toil and danger, to any minister, to any parliament, or any body of men upon earth, by whom we are not represented, and in whose decisions, therefore, we have no voice." End quote. And in case you thought that they stopped there, again, the backcountry of Virginia was 3 counties, and Botetourt County published their resolutions on March 11th of 1775. They addressed these resolutions to Colonel Andrew Lewis and Mr. John Bowyer, who were their representatives. I tried to narrow it down to just a brief passage to quote here, but whoever wrote this, they were on fire. And my favorite section is this, quote, "A set of miscreants, unworthy to administer the laws of Britain's empire, have been permitted impiously to sway. How unjustly, cruelly, and tyrannically they have invaded our rights, we need not now put you in mind. We only say, and we assert it with pride, that the subjects of Britain are one, and when the honest man of Boston, who has broken no law, has his property wrested from him, the hunter on the Allegheny must take the alarm, and, as a free man of America, he will fly to his representatives and thus instruct them: Gentlemen, my gun, my tomahawk, my life, I desire you to tender to the honor of the king and country. But my liberty, to range these woods on the same terms my father has done, is not mine to give up. It was not purchased by me, and purchased it was. It is entailed on my son, and the tenure is sacred. Watch over it, gentlemen, for to him it must descend unviolated, if my arm can defend it. But if not, if wicked power is permitted to prevail against me, the original purchase was blood, and mine shall seal the surrender." End quote. The backcountry may have been a rougher environment than the cities along the coast, but it was clearly full of educated citizens, literate citizens, who knew their mind just like the rest of the colonies. In these resolutions, you see very similar thoughts to what was expressed elsewhere. But again, as I've talked about in other videos, we look at the frontier almost as if it's a separate world, as if the events in Boston and Philadelphia are kind of separate, kind of divided from it. But clearly that's not the case. Clearly there's a lot of communication that occurred, travel even, and a lot of the same ideas being expressed. It's really easy for people to talk about, being willing to lay down their life and shed their blood for their country or their state. But the thing is, talk's cheap. A lot of the people who make those comments have never had to do that, and in the modern day, hopefully never will. But what I find interesting about these resolutions from the backcountry is that these men who are well acquainted with risking their lives, they lived in an area that was always at risk of altercations with the Native American tribes, of an Indian war breaking out. When the French and Indian War had broke out, they're the ones that are at the greatest risk. This was not new to them. So when they talked about liberty being purchased by their fathers and entailed to their sons, these are not empty words. When they talk about being willing to bleed for it, it's not empty. It's not a possibility that hopefully will never happen. This is a daily reality for them. They had just gotten back from proving it. Whether you like them or not, if we're going to talk about their relationships with the Native American tribes and who's right, who's wrong, there's a lot of discussion to be had there. But no matter how you look at it, these are men who practiced what they preached, meant what they said, and they were willing to prove it. I hope you found these resolutions as interesting as I did, and hopefully they give you a different perspective of the frontier as we approach the American Revolution. Thanks so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see y'all next time.